Now, no one knows this fight better than Gloria Allred. Now, Allred is well known as the attorney who represents dozens of accusers in the Bill Cosby case, in the R. Kelly case. She also represents accusers in the Harvey Weinstein case, the Jeffrey Epstein case. And she was the longtime attorney for Jane Roe. That's right, the woman in the Roe v. Wade case whose real name was Norma McCorvey. Gloria Allred herself has spoken about her own rape and a back alley abortion where she almost lost her life. And a warning, some of the details of that are very graphic. And she joins us now. Gloria, always good to talk to you. Let's start your reaction when you saw the political leaked draft of the Supreme Court's decision. Were you surprised?
Well, it was shocking. It was catastrophic for women and girls. It is a draft opinion, but apparently it is an authentic opinion of the Supreme Court. And there'll probably be some minor changes made in some of the language of the decision, but the final decision will come out in the next 6 weeks, and I expect it to also reverse Roe v. Wade, which means that it will have to, the subject will return to the states to decide if they will criminalize abortion or not, and half of the states plan to ban it if they have not already done so. So this is a very dangerous time. We expected some modification of Roe v. Wade because of the appointments to the Supreme Court, the confirmation of certain, they would call themselves conservatives. I would say some of them are very extreme, right-wing justices, and they are the majority of the U.S. Supreme Court. So we expected it, but not this very severe, cataclysmic blow to Roe v. Wade. It's shocking after 50 years, almost 50 years of Roe v. Wade, and it's very disturbing. You've seen the president's response. What are the legal options if indeed this judgment does pass? Then what? Well, the President Biden did say today that it is radical, and he is completely correct about that. As to any legal remedy, there's nothing higher than the United States Supreme Court. So what we would have to do is go into the political realm. Political realm, it means that we have to do what Mother Jones said, which is don't agonize, organize. We have to get voters who care about the right to choose legal, safe, affordable, and available abortions to go to vote. Vote for members of Congress and the United States Senate who are pro-choice, and throw those anti-choice senators and representatives out of the United States Congress. Likewise, we have to urge people to look at their state elected officials and also vote them out of office when they run for re-election, or not vote for them when they run for election, and select and vote for pro-choice candidates. Tell me, I mean, this is on many levels, you know this issue maybe better than anybody, Gloria Allred. How did you come to represent Jane Roe, Norma McCorvey, from the Roe v. Wade case? Well, I was standing at a pro-choice rally in Washington, D.C., sometime after Roe v. Wade became the law of the land. She came up to me and introduced herself as Jane Roe of Roe v. Wade. And of course, I was thrilled to meet her. And I asked her if she'd be speaking at this big pro-choice rally. And she said no, she wasn't invited. And she hadn't been invited, she said, to speak out in support of choice. And she wanted to do that. She then asked me if I could help her, and I said, yes, I think your voice is important. I think people need to know who the Jane Roe is behind the Roe of Roe v. Wade. And so for a long time, we did speak out together at pro-choice rallies and events. Ultimately, she, some years later, decided to change sides and become against the right to choose legal and safe abortion. But she still maintained a very cordial relationship with me because she understood that I'm about choice. Whether a person chooses to be pro-choice or against the right to choose abortion, that's a woman's choice. So we maintained contact and communication. Right. Ultimately, before her death, she gave a deathbed confession, so to speak, and admitted that she really hadn't been anti-choice after all. She'd been pro-choice. And I think that was the real Jane Roe of Roe v. Wade that was speaking at that time.
The personal and the political mix. For you, this is political, but it's also personal. And you've been yes. open about what happened to you. You talked about when you were younger in Mexico, getting raped at gunpoint and almost dying in a back alley abortion. Can you talk about that, Gloria?
Yes, I returned to California after being raped at gunpoint. But I found that, and this was in the 1960s, that abortion, that a woman could not obtain a legal and safe abortion in California at that time. In other words, from a licensed healthcare provider like a doctor or nurse. So I decided that what I would do is, pay someone to give me an abortion. And that's a back alley abortion. A stranger that I didn't know, who only did it for the money, who did perform the abortion, who then left me in a bathtub, hemorrhaging, bathtub filling up with my own blood. And when I called to see if I can get some help from him, he said that he only does the abortion, doesn't take care of what happens afterwards, and I should basically tear up his number. Ultimately, I was taken in an ambulance to the hospital with 106-degree fever and almost died. But a nurse said to me in the hospital, and this is in my documentary on Netflix called Seeing All Red. It's a documentary about my decades of battles for women's rights. The nurse said, "This should teach you a lesson," and it did teach me a lesson, but not the one she wanted, which is not to have an abortion or be raped. The lesson I learned was that abortion should be legal and affordable and available to anyone who wants it. That looks like it's not going to be the case after the Supreme Court rules, probably in June.
First of all, thank you for sharing that remarkably difficult story, Gloria, but if this draft opinion passes in June, as you talked about, does it have wider implications? Can the Supreme Court decision on this case, which is based on a rejection of something called unenumerated rights, I don't want to get too technical, but basically implied rights that the justice said are not strongly rooted in history or tradition. Can this mean it could be a precedent to take away other hard-won rights? I don't know, gay rights, gay marriage.
Well, absolutely, because it's doing away with the right to privacy, which, although not explicitly stated in the United States Constitution, is implicit in the right to liberty and the right to due process. And that is at the heart of many other cases and many other issues as well. For example, it's at the heart of Griswold versus Connecticut, which is about, the right of an individual to have a right to privacy with their marital partner and to be able to use contraceptives. So it could do away with the right to use contraceptives as a method of birth control. It could do away with the marriage equality, the important United States Supreme Court decision that allows same-sex couples to marry and found that they have a constitutional right to marry. Could do away with interracial marriage, which was a decision by the Supreme Court in Loving versus Virginia many years ago, where an interracial couple had been denied the right to marry. There are so many other cases. And even though the opinion seems to look at that trail of horribles, so to speak, and say, oh, this is limited to abortion, I don't believe it, because we have seen this creepy, crawly erosion of our rights before, and it's possible that another Supreme Court another differently constituted United States Supreme Court in the future could cite this decision if, as and when it becomes one, and do away with the right to privacy as well.
Lots of implications as the abortion fight begins again in the United States. Gloria Allred, a discrimination attorney in the U.S., known for many very high-profile cases involving the protection of women's rights. Gloria, always a pleasure. Thank you.
Well, you too. And may I just say, this is really going to affect poor women and women of color and young women and rural women. And really, it's about these women who should have a right to be protected and not have their lives placed endangered and placed at risk. Thank you, Evan, for having me.
Yeah, thank you, Gloria. Gloria Allred, thanks.